Hey guys, it's Bob at ILikeToMakeStuff here with a new BrainPick episode, and we have an awesome guest tonight, and I'm going to get to him in just a second. Before that, I want to say one quick thing. If you're in the Atlanta area this weekend, there's a Maker Faire in Atlanta October 4th and 5th, and it's going to be really awesome. They're going to have over 200 different exhibitors of all sorts of different stuff, pretty much anything that you can think of. I'm going to be there. That's not the reason you should go. You should go because it's going to be awesome, but I will be there, and I would love to meet you if you come. It's going to be one of the bigger ones in the Southeast. There's a lot of mini Maker Fairs, but the Atlanta one is one of the biggest. So if you're anywhere that's not New York or San Francisco, this is probably one of the biggest ones you're going to be able to get to. So be sure to come on down to that October 4th and 5th. So tonight we have Marc Spagnuolo, the Wood Whisperer. He has over like 150,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's been on YouTube since 2006. He does a ton of amazing work and shares knowledge with people all over the world all the time. And so I'm really excited to have him. And so, hi, Marc.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. I haven't done a hangout in a long time, so I'm looking forward to just chatting with people and let's talk about some woodworking.
Yeah. So we got a couple questions coming in. And if you guys want to address the questions, you can. You don't have to, but if you want it to be both of us, put both. If you want it to be to one of us, just start it with our name so I can get it to, who you want to get the right answer from. So let's start right here with Joel. What do you think about all the new woodworkers on YouTube, like Bob here?
They're all jerks. Honestly, I love it. And one of my problems is having enough time to look at all of this stuff. I'm so busy with what I'm doing with my business, with my family. It's very difficult for me to find time to actually enjoy some of the great content that's out there. I know when I first started this stuff back in 2006, this is what I dreamed of. I thought, like, this would be amazing if we just had a community of people sharing what they do in their workshops and making content that other people can enjoy and learn from online. And it took a while to really get to the boiling point that it's at right now, because it seems like it's hot. There's a lot of people jumping in, and I think it's great. I think the bottom line is the more people, my thing has always been the more people that find out about woodworking, at whatever level, I don't care what level it is, they find out about it and they start going on their own path into the craft, the better it is for us as a country, as a global community too, because I think we get so far away from things like working with our hands in such a technology-driven world. So for me personally, the more stuff that's out there, the more chance of some 16-year-old kid getting inspiration to build something because they haven't gotten that exposure in school, but they found it by watching Bob on YouTube. To me, that's awesome. So I think it should be celebrated.
Yeah, I know I was in the question, but I have an opinion there too. I totally agree with that. And one of the things that I think is so cool about that is that there's a lot of people that do things that are similar on YouTube, but everybody brings their own personality to it. Everybody has I don't want to say character, that's the wrong word, but a presence and a history that they're bringing to what they're doing. And so even like in the case where a bunch of people will be doing the exact same project at the same time, everyone is completely different. They're bringing a different skill set. They're bringing different interests and a different goal to it. And yeah, there's no way that could be bad. So
no. And the thing is, you're absolutely right. It is about character. It is about the thing is, here's the truth. None of this is new information. Nothing I could tell anybody is new. Nothing any of these other woodworkers. Maybe there's a little twist on something you haven't seen, but it's new to the people who are watching because maybe they're new to the craft. But the truth is, Fine Woodworking has probably published all of this stuff 10 times over by now. So it's our goal to bring a little bit of extra personality to it so that maybe someone thought Fine Woodworking was a little stuffy and they couldn't relate. Well, now they could relate to people that look like me or people that look like you. So it is about that character. It is about finding someone who you want to learn from, who inspires you. And that may not happen with the sort of traditional media that's already out there.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. All right, so I got another one here for both. What was your first woodworking project, and did you keep it? You can go first.
First woodworking project. Well, this, I guess it depends on what you call like a real project. I used to build all kinds of stuff as a kid. I think the first thing that I would call sort of a piece of furniture was a reptile enclosure that I built. I used to work at a PetSmart as a specialty manager is what they called me. and which is just a weird job. But I took care of all the reptiles and the fish and birds, and had a customer who wanted a custom enclosure, and I was kind of handy, and I'm like, oh well, you know what? I can see we don't really sell anything like this, but maybe I'll try and put some 2x4s together with some chicken wire and make this enclosure for her. And it turned out really nice. And I used a jigsaw to make some of the cuts and some screws, and had no idea what I was doing. But the bottom line is it safely enclosed this giant iguana and did a great job. So since then, I built 2 or 3 for other people that I met through PetSmart. And I think those were probably my first legitimate projects, I guess you could say.
You're going to laugh when you hear my answer because it's almost identical.
Oh, really?
Yeah. As a kid, I used to piddle around in my dad and my granddad's shop, and I would stick wood together, but it wasn't anything. And then we made pinewood derby cars, I guess. But the first thing that I really made by myself was in college, and a friend of mine had 2 pet rats, and she needed an enclosure for her rats.
Nice.
And so I ended up making a stand with some plexiglass, and it was real basic, but it was a place for her to keep her 2 pet rats. And then from there, it was like, I needed a bed for college, so I made a bed and stuff like that. But
once you realize you could just take a couple of boards and make something, it's incredibly liberating, because there's just so many little things that you can do with just a little bit of skill that you no longer have to buy this thing or search for the perfect custom solution, because you could do it yourself.
Yeah, and that just is a rabbit hole that you go down, or at least I've gone down. I'm like, oh, well, that thing's actually pretty cheap to buy, but I can still make it. I can make it for twice the price, so I should probably do it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we got another one here. What are the benefits of beginning with hand tools versus a power tool upbringing?
It's hard for me to say that because that's not what I did. I'm mostly from a power tool background initially, and then migrated into hand tools as I began to see the value that they really bring to the quality of work that you can do. So I don't really know that perspective. I recently wrote a book called Hybrid Woodworking, and it's really about the combining of those two things, but I was very clear at the beginning to state that this is not telling a hand tool woodworker how to bring power tools into their shop. That's a different conversation. For me, it's about telling power tool woodworkers, which is honestly where most of us come from, how to bring hand tools into the shop from that perspective. And I think really when you just dig around a little bit, now it's a little bit of a different time now because there are so many people like us out there doing these things. There's a lot of great hand tool users on YouTube. You may get that hand tool exposure early on. For me, that wasn't there at the time. I was watching woodworkers on TV, I was reading books and looking at DVDs, and it was all, for the most part, all power tool. So that was just the path that I took. So if one were to start with hand tools, I do think there is some benefit there, because everything that power tools do, they kind of have their root in a hand tool operation. It's just doing it faster, it's doing it in an automated fashion, and making it probably a little bit easier. So if you have that background and skill, I think it's kind of like, learning to code versus using some sort of WYSIWYG editor. If you're talking about, building websites, if you understand the underlying code that goes into it, you could do a lot more with it, and you could be more powerful. Even if you eventually use the quicker tool, you still have the knowledge that helps you be a more well-rounded person building a website, let's say. So I think the same rudimentary stuff and fundamentals that come from hand tools are just incredibly valuable as a power tool user.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I'm kind of the same where I came from power tools, and honestly never had a huge interest in pursuing like a lot of hand tool work. Maybe I'm just impatient. That might be the reason for it. But I think I could see there being a big benefit if someone started that way, if for no other reason that you have a different experience with the material. You understand a little bit more about how different woods react to a blade, to a chisel or whatever, than you would with something that has power behind it that's going to push through wood no matter what type of wood it is. So I could see there being a benefit there, and just exposure to the material and understanding a little more about how to effectively use it. But at the same time, you learn that stuff, and then if you end up moving to power tools, I don't know that that's really necessary or useful. But there's benefit, I'm sure. All right, so we got another one down here. This is for both of us, where do you get your ideas for a new project? Is it by request from a customer, or do you make it when it comes to mind?
For me personally, it's mostly what comes to mind. It's hard not to take influence from conversations I have with other woodworkers, emails that come in and say, hey, why don't you build something like this? So there have been times where my projects were inspired from other people's ideas. But most of the time, I'm just like anybody else. If I build something and have no use for it, what am I going to do with it? I've got to have somebody to give it to. I can't just keep collecting projects. So most things will come about because my mom needs a new something, or Nicole, my wife, requests something be built. So most of the time it does serve a purpose, and occasionally, maybe only a couple times a year, do I do client work anymore. And I've got one particular client who's been awesome that I continue to work with every year, and I build usually 1 or 2 pieces for him throughout the year. And he's just a fun guy to work for, so I enjoy that process too.
Yeah, I promise I'm not stealing or copying all your answers, but I'm actually kind of the same the same way.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of commission stuff. I do things on occasion, but and even commission kind of fits into this category. But I really prefer for the things that I make to be purpose built. So they're going to someone because that's what they want, whether I want it or not, or I want to make it or not. If it's purpose built for that person, then that has a lot of value to me, and that makes it worthwhile. Most of the stuff I do for my channel and for my blog, those things are generally to fill a need. Like I think I've said this before in previous videos, but like I made an on-air light. I needed that in my house so I could tell my wife and kids when I'm on a phone call or when I'm in a meeting, so that I could actually keep them quiet.
Smart.
But it turned out that was a cool project that I could share with other people, but it did actually fill a need. So most of my stuff is kind of the same way. Here's one from David Picciuto.
David,
what's the thing you look forward to every day? What excites you the most about doing what you do?
Okay, well, 2 separate answers. At this point in my life, the thing I look forward to every day is waking up and seeing my son's face. And the kid's just a ball of energy, and it may be 5:30 in the morning, but I don't know. I'm at that point in parenting where I'm still in I guess maybe the honeymoon stage. Maybe that doesn't go away. I don't know. Obviously, there's moments that aren't as great, but honestly, waking up in the morning and I see my kid, and I look over and I see my wife, and I think, this is a pretty good life. I got to be happy with where I'm at. And I think part of being happy, having the time to appreciate all those things, comes from what I do for a living. The fact that here's the thing, the way I look at stress level and work, no matter what you do, you will always, or I think people in general tend to always make whatever the stressful things are in their life, they bring them to a level 10. Even if by someone else's scale, that's not something to be stressed out about, by my scale, something simple like that may be something to be stressed out about. So even as fortunate as I consider myself with what I do every day, there are points where I look and I'm just like, oh, how am I going to get this many videos out in this time, or get this project done? I've got something due on Friday and an article due here. It's really stressful, but it's being able to step away from that. And I was having a conversation with Nicole at lunch today about this exact thing, is being able to step away and kind of just look at the big picture. Like a bad day of building furniture in my shop, like you could take the worst day. It's always going to be better than my best day when I was answering tech service calls for an antibody company. That was crap. I hated that. So I'll take, I ruin a part or I screw up a project or something, I'll take that kind of stress over the stuff I used to deal with any day. So I feel that I'm incredibly fortunate with what I do. So what excites me about it, David, is just being able to be creative and to be able to choose what I want to do every day that I go out into my shop.
Good answer. Nice. All right, here's another one. Is there anything in your woodworking career that you wish you would have done sooner, or something that you may have done different if you had the chance?
Yeah, this is kind of a catch-22 for me. The only reason anybody knows who I am is because I started a podcast. It's not because of my woodworking. It's because I was the first person to say, let's do a woodworking video podcast and be stupid on the web. I have some regrets attached to that, because as soon as I started teaching other people, my learning curve, which was like this initially, my learning curve kind of plateaued, and then now it's on a slight uphill, incline. But my trajectory has changed dramatically since I started going down this teaching route, because so much of my time is spent on things like making the website look the way I want it to look, looking at my stats, seeing what the audience is responding to and adjusting based on that, and trying not to outpace my audience while making this side of my audience happy because they're more advanced woodworkers. It's a challenge to balance it all, but the end result is a lot of times I wind up going with a safer choice, than I really want. If there's a technique that I've never done before and I'm absolutely uncomfortable doing it, it's probably not a good thing for me to just jump in and film and try to teach people, unless it's being sold as kind of like, okay, we're going to experiment together sort of thing. But ultimately, because I started the whole podcast thing, my personal learning curve has slowed down quite a bit, and I think that is something, I don't know that I would do it differently, because I absolutely love what I do, but it is something that I live with as a bit of a regret that I don't think, when I finally leave this world, I will probably not be as good of a woodworker or a craftsman as I would have been if I didn't start the podcast. But I'm probably going to be very much okay with that, because what I may have done, if the cards are played out right, is inspire hundreds of other people, thousands of other people, who probably will exceed my woodworking skill and go on to teach other people woodworking. And that's where my legacy is going to come from, is not the furniture that I made, but the people who I taught. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, right on. Okay, well, speaking of teaching and inspiring, who inspired you to begin creating things? This is for both of us. I'll say for me, I've been creating stuff to some degree my entire life, and I think a lot of that was driven by my dad and my granddad. They just were always, they always had wood shops. They were always doing something or fixing something, and my parents, gave me the opportunity to pursue art. And when you go down the art path, you start to realize that there's freedom to create no matter what you're doing, whether it's useful or not useful. So I think a lot of my inspiration just came from them, from my parents and my grandparents.
For me, it is similar. My stepdad, growing up, was very handy. So if we needed a new wall put up or we wanted to expand our house, my stepdad would just, go get the 2x4s and start framing walls. So I learned to swing a hammer from him, and it was his kind of can-do attitude that if something breaks, I try to fix it first instead of calling someone to fix it. That mentality, I think, is what inspired me to start being creative and building things. And he wasn't exactly even really a woodworker. I mean, he had a radial arm saw in our basement and, some basic carpentry tools. But really, that inspiration for making stuff can come from just the simplest things like that. So I would have to say my stepdad.
Yeah. All right, so this is one for both of us. It says it's for both of us, with an emphasis directed at Mark. Having made the transition from standard employment to full-time YouTuber, where do you see the future of YouTube and similar media as routes to employment for young people?
You know what? That is something I don't know that I'm even prepared to really answer in an accurate way, because I can't predict the future. I probably would not have predicted that the opportunities that are there today would be there. I didn't really know where any of this was going. So based on my track record of predicting the future not being very good, I don't even know. There are so many opportunities, but here's the thing. To clarify, I don't consider myself a YouTuber. I think a YouTuber is a very, not very different, but a little bit of a different way of doing things. I distribute my content on YouTube, but my primary business is the Wood Whisperer as a producer of content. If YouTube collapsed tomorrow, we're talking about Google here, they're not going anywhere, but hypothetical situation, bear with me. If YouTube suddenly stopped working, or let's say Google pulled AdSense payments from YouTube, my business would survive. And that's what a real business does. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. So my hope, not to go off on a tangent here, my hope is that the people who consider themselves YouTubers are actually building businesses outside of YouTube. Do not put your eggs in one company's basket, because they may take your basket away at some point. So you need to have a sort of more well-rounded business structure. That said, I think it's very possible to build some amazing, fun, viable businesses using YouTube as part of that strategy, and it could be a major part of that strategy, but you better have something underlying it in order to call it true employment as a job, right? Because otherwise you're sort of the little fish swimming around sucking on the side of the shark's face. You don't want to be that. You want to make sure you have a food source elsewhere other than the big shark.
Yeah,
I do think it's possible.
Yeah, and you've been on YouTube long enough you've been putting stuff there long enough to see a lot of change in the way that they handle ads and promotion and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, we've been there since 2006, and initially I had a really love-hate relationship with YouTube when we first started uploading. The environment there in the comments, and this is not for everybody, but you guys know as well as I do that the comments sections of YouTube videos can be brutal. It's not a very inviting area to have conversations. So it was not a very attractive place to put my content. So there were times where I would make a video and I wouldn't even put it on YouTube just because YouTube wasn't the giant distribution medium that it is today. So we've been spending the last, my wife has been spending the last year going back to old episodes and just making sure they're up on YouTube, even if we just keep them out of the feed so people don't think it's a new episode, but at least they have it, they have access to it, just because it's always been a tough environment to navigate. And it has changed a lot, but I think the primary thing that's changed is you have to be on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, you're really missing out on a great opportunity for exposure for your content, your brand, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and back to the the kind of basic question, I think there is a huge amount of opportunity, but as that opportunity grows, the playing field grows too. So if you look at the mass of content on YouTube, I mean, a huge majority of it has nothing to do with DIY of any kind. It has nothing to do with educational content. I mean, there's a lot of that, but the big mass is pop culture, vlogging, stuff like that. So those industries, or I don't know, industry is the right word, those type of content are already oversaturated. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to go away or anything, but that's where people outside of kind of our community, that's what people see as a growing thing on YouTube. It's already saturated. It's going to be really hard to get into that and to be productive and to make like a job out of gaming or whatever. Long term, I mean, it's possible, but long term, those things are not probably going to be the place to go. Now, the type of stuff that we do, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity because it's relatively so small. The community and the amount of content relative to vlogging and all that other stuff is way, way tinier. So there's a lot more opportunity there. But it depends really on the young person that you're talking about, what they want to do with it and what they're trying to chase.
Well, and there's also the concept of like playing the YouTube game. If you are a YouTuber, there are certain things you can do with your video, with your editing style, with the placement of clickable items and elements within your video. There are things you can do to be successful on YouTube that if you don't do, you have to be okay with having fewer numbers, right? So there's basically, like, you could just go on Google and get help documents on this stuff that teach you how to make a better YouTube video. Now the thing is, does that make a better video? Does it make a better instructional video for people to learn from? Not necessarily. They're two different things. So one thing that I am a little bit concerned about is, as new woodworking YouTubers come into the fold, if they're playing the YouTube game too much, that may be done because they want the numbers. That may be done at the expense of actually producing truly quality content. So yes, blowing through a project in 2 seconds and showing how great your skill is, but not teaching anything, that will get more views because there's a lot of people who aren't quite that interested in the details who will sit through that 2 minutes. Great, successful video, a lot of views. But are you teaching other people how to do what you just did, or are you saying, hey, look what I can do? So I think it's a sort of a conflict there, and I don't know what's more successful, what's not, but I know taking longer to explain something on YouTube is a great way to have fewer views. It's something that I learned, which is, like you said, I've been doing this since 2006, but I'm actually perfectly okay with my numbers being where they are because I can only take so much information out of my videos before I'm no longer happy with the content I'm producing. And if I'm not happy with it, then I may as well be doing something else. So I'm okay with that because I think the people in my smaller audience are more, maybe they're just more interested in woodworking, or they're deeper into the crafts, so or maybe they just want to get more detail. They're in that information-seeking phase. They're not just looking to be entertained; they're looking to learn. But the good thing is, I think there's room for everybody to provide all these different types of content. So everybody should be able to do what they want to do, and then live with the audience that they generate as a result.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the problems with virality of videos, on YouTube. Is a channel will come along, or a content creator will come along and get something that just draws a huge amount of traffic to them. Yeah. Everybody subscribes, and then the next video they come out with is not like that. And then they bail on them. But you're not, in your case, you've spent a very long time building a reputation for what you do and how you do it. People come there and stay there because they know what you're going to do, and that didn't happen overnight. So that has a lot to do with it. You know, long-term strategy and
Sure.
and staying true to, you know, what you're doing and why you're doing it. And yeah.
Yeah,
It's
hard.
I don't know that a young YouTuber or a young content creator is really going to get that yet.
Yeah, it's a different environment. I mean, when I started it, there wasn't anyone else doing it, so it was very easy to get noticed. If you know, I think about this all the time. What if the Wood Whisperer didn't exist, and I suddenly today started a new show on YouTube called The Wood Whisperer? How far would I go? I don't know. I don't think I would. I probably wouldn't be able to do a weekly show, which is something that seems to be part of the formula to at least do one show a week, if not more. I wouldn't be able to keep up with that pace and do what I do. So I have to wonder if I could be successful if I were to start today. There's just so much, I'm going to say white noise, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but there's so much white noise out there. There's so many people making, and here's the problem, it's good white noise. There's a lot of good content out there that is very easy to be overshadowed by a lot of the other stuff that's going on in the YouTube environment. So I honestly don't think I could be very successful if I were to start today fresh.
All right, so let's get to another question here. This is from Matt DeResta. Both you guys, when you're filming a video as compared to just making a project, do you plan the video from the beginning, like with shots and key points, or do you just build how you would normally and film it?
For me, it's all about following the build path. Very, very seldom do I actually deviate from that, and if I do, it's only because I think it's going to make more sense for the audience to see something in a different order. But to me, the best way to teach someone how to build something is to show them the actual build steps that are in that process. So if you put it in that logical series of steps and then display it in that logical series of steps, it works better. An example is something where I might change it around. Pre-finishing. If you're filming a video and showing people how to build a project, pre-finishing is one of those things that just kind of like everything stops to a halt. We're not actually done. We haven't gotten the great shot of the finished piece assembled yet, but now we're going to talk about finishing. It's a really weird sort of anticlimactic way to finish off a project. So there are times where I might have pre-finished, but for the sake of making a good presentation, I'm not going to pre-finish. I'm going to assemble first and then apply the finish so that there's that big wow moment at the end. So there are times where I'll make those changes, but most of the time I try to let the build process dictate the video. And as far as like scripting and things like that, I make a rough outline sometimes on more complicated stuff, but most of the time it's been doing it long enough now that I kind of have an idea of what shots I want, what I think people are going to want to see, where I need to get like secondary footage or a close-up of something because I only have a one-camera setup. So I do sometimes get deep into the details, but these days it's kind of second nature, and I just put a memory card in and go.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't have the luxury of time to be able to, you know, do something out of order or do a whole lot of detail on a certain thing. I really need to get through a project because my time in the shop is so limited, and then I have to factor in editing and all that stuff. But I do think if I spend, I know I spend a great deal more time filming a project than if I were just making it, and I think the majority of that is spent on trying to figure out the best way to get a point across. So if I'm doing a detail of something, or you know, showing something that's very specific but it's small, I have to figure out the best way to visually show that off, knowing that I'm going to come back and voice over later and try to explain it. But so I think I spend the majority of my time trying to set up shots to make sure that I'm capturing the important things. Not everything is important. Not everything you need to show, you know, fully. You don't need to show every moment of sanding, you know, for 2 hours and stuff like that. But yeah, there are details that are, you know, pivotal for how something will turn out, and so making sure that I can frame those correctly and get those across, I think, is where I spend the majority of my time. You know,
yeah, and I think it's something that you get better at over time. I mean, I look at old videos. I look at videos I made last year, and I'm like, oh, why didn't I cut that a little bit shorter? I could have cut that by 5 seconds and cut this by 5 seconds, and the whole video would have been shorter. You get to a point where you start to realize you're responsible for the viewer's time. And if they're going to sit there and spend time watching this thing, I'm going to respect their time by trying to pack as much information into this thing as possible. And usually what that means is not talking to the camera so much. If you talk to the camera, you are wasting time. There's nothing you can say that you couldn't say faster with a voiceover and a script that you wrote out while you're sitting in the editing chair. So usually these days my challenge is to find out, what do I want to talk to the camera about? and what do I want to reserve for voiceover work. But yeah, and you're totally right. Everything just takes longer when you're filming it. So that's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, speaking of old projects, there's one for both of us here. When you see some of your older projects, is it hard not to be critical? For instance, a gift you gave to someone a few years back, does it make you cringe, or are you able to keep it in perspective?
These days, it's a little bit easier because I would say anything I've produced within the past 4 to 5 years reflects what I would consider a higher level of woodworking for me personally. I got to a certain threshold where my quality standards got to a certain point that I look back and I might look at the design and say, I could have done something different with that. My sensibility for good design improves over time constantly. But as far as skillfully executing a particular joint or making a finish look good, I no longer really have those regrets with older pieces. Now, there are certainly pieces that go back a little bit further that I look at and cringe and wonder what I was thinking, and as I'm watching a joint fall apart and my mom refuses to get rid of it because it was the first thing I ever made for her and she's got to keep it around and I just want to take it in the backyard and burn it. So yeah, there are certainly things like that. The key, though, the thing that I keep into perspective is the fact that I made it for my mom. Objects that I've made for other people, there's a sort of sentimentality with those things that it's special to them. So even if I'm not happy with it anymore, it's theirs. There's something special, and they don't want to get rid of it. So that allows me to put the whole thing in perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, like most of the things that I have made they don't go anywhere. You know, they're generally either they don't go anywhere or they go somewhere where I will never see them again. And if they go somewhere that I never see them, then they're perfect in my mind.
Out of sight, out of mind.
That's right. Or if it's something I've kept, I've made it for a specific reason. So generally, I'm happy with it until it doesn't serve that purpose anymore. That doesn't mean I'm excited about all the details of the built-ins that I've made or things like that. But nothing that I'm so disappointed with that I would want to remake it or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't do the finish quality that you do. You do nice furniture, very finished, detailed things, and my stuff's a little more utilitarian. So
right.
There's less to be nitpicky about, I think, in the type of work that I do. So
sure.
All right, here's one from Izzy for both of us. Hi guys, one question I get a lot is how to overcome that creative slump and the mid-project frustration. Excuse me, when the concern about how a project is going to turn out sets in. What advice would you offer to up-and-coming woodworkers?
Okay, so mid-project frustration is something that, let me just make sure I get this straight in my mind before I get into it. Overcome a creative slump. Okay, two very different things. Mid-project frustration for me is something that I no longer have a problem with, and it's just because I'm really busy and I don't have time to sit around and sulk about there's someone. I think when someone's expecting your work, whether it's a client or someone expecting a video that you're making of your content, it's a little bit easier to push through those things because you have to get this thing out. It's a deadline. You need to do it, so you suck it up, and even if you're not in the mood, you go in the shop and you get the job done. But one thing for me, I think that gets through those slump phases, and early on when I first started my woodworking business, I would do this where I didn't really have a client. I was trying to build stuff to kind of build up my portfolio. I would sit in the shop and I would be like, okay, now I've got a full work day. I don't work in the science world anymore, so here I am in my shop. What the hell do I do with my time now? And what I realized is that I needed a little bit more structure. I needed to know what my task was, because in the middle of a project, a lot of times you start looking at the finish line. You see the finished project. It's just, you could just grab it. You could almost taste it, but you have all these other things in your way. The problem is you're focused on that finished product, and that's what makes all the things between you and the end of the project look like there's all these barriers there. So what I like to do is set mini goals for myself, and this is nothing more than being organized. I print out, and I've said this a lot, so some people may have heard this before, but I print out a Google Calendar. I go old school. So I print out the month, and I look at what's coming up this week, and I break down every day with a series of tasks. So my goal-oriented mind says, I'm not worried about the finish of the project. I'm not worried about the end. I just want to get to the end of the day. So what do I have to do today? Okay, I'm making frame and panel doors. Okay, here's what I'm going to accomplish. That's on the docket for today. And then tomorrow there's another series of things. And what actually winds up happening is I wind up, once I put it down, most times I actually wind up ahead of schedule because I get to the end of my list and I go, oh, I'm done early. I should go back and actually let me do the first thing that's on my list for tomorrow. And it snowballs, and I actually hit those goals, and I feel like I've accomplished more. So to me, that's the way to get over the slump from, not the slump, but the midweek hump that you need to get over when you're working on a project. Put it in an outline form, put different tasks on different days, and just accomplish mini goals. And you'll be surprised at how much it changes your mindset. And now the end of the project is not this big, light at the end of the tunnel. It's just the last thing in a series of days.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. I tend to look at projects as problems to be solved, and a big problem is just a set of small problems. And so that's the way I approach, anything. I mean, this stuff work-wise, I write software for a living, so it's the same kind of thing. A piece of software is a bunch of tiny pieces of software. So it's just a matter of solving the small problems along the way, and then you stand up and you realize that you're making progress, and an overall view. As far as the time or creative slump, I don't have the time to have a creative slump. I personally am just driven to be productive, and I have a huge list of things that I will never ever have the time to do. But I have that list that goes out into the sunset, and as soon as I finish one thing, I'm on to the next thing on the list. So personally, I don't have the creative slump. Now if I was doing this full time, maybe I would get through these things faster, and that could be a very different situation. But
and I think
there again, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Well, I was going to say another part of that I think is relative to me being very purpose-driven in the things that I do. So, if you were making art, I could see a creative slump being a very difficult problem. Yeah. Because the creativity that comes from nowhere is the thing or comes from you is the thing that drives what you're doing. For me, a lot of the things are very purpose-driven, very practical, and there will always be practical needs around me. So I have a pretty good, wealth of things to fill up my list.
Yeah. Well, and I think also it depends on your production pace. If you're trying to put out a video a week or trying to accomplish a project every week, that's a very different situation. That's why I don't do that, because I don't want to tax my creativity at that level. So I'd rather build, maybe more complicated projects, but maybe I'm only doing 1 or 2 a month as opposed to cramming all these, extra projects on my list. To me, it's just a more fun way to work. Recently, I was trying to design one of the next projects I'm going to be building on the free site is one of those things they call like a learning tower or a kitchen helper for like little kids, toddlers, to be able to get to kitchen countertop height. And here's the thing, I had to design one, and I'm looking around. There's the Anna White plan that's out there. Everybody references it, and there's a couple of commercial products. The thing is, both of those have done the job really well. So you look at it, and it's like, all right, here's my design challenge. I need to reinvent the wheel just for the sake of reinventing the wheel, because I can't put a video out there that's a copy of Anna White's project and say, here you go, here's the Wood Whisperer version, I painted it a different color. It doesn't work. So I found myself in a very difficult creative design slump for the last couple of days, trying to come up with a design that was different than what's already out there, but that I could justify its existence, and it isn't just arbitrary because I needed to do something different. And I did get to a point where my wife was just like, you know what, stop. I'll go buy the damn thing. All I want is, I want Mateo to be up 16 inches so he can reach the counter. And I'm like, no, I'm going to get this. Like, give me more time. So I eventually did get there. But, for me, the creative stuff, it just came from looking around at other stuff, getting inspired by other people's projects, and looking a little bit outside of the area I was particularly focused on. Again, all roads lead to Anna White, apparently. And I basically looked outside of that a little bit and tried to find other things to inspire me from other types of step stools. And that kind of got me through the slump. It got me to a point where I came up with a design I'm happy with.
Cool. I got a couple here from Oscar, and one is for me, and it's how I grow such a great beard.
That's a good question.
Practice. That's my answer. Okay, so the other one is for both of us. What would you get first, a bandsaw or a table saw?
Ooh. I would get a table saw first. A table saw, while a lot of times gets a bad rap because people get injured badly on it. If used properly and safely, the table saw is an amazing multitasker that can do things from helping you mill your wood to tons of different types of joinery. The bandsaw can do quite a bit too, but you have to make some compromises with it. And most of the time when you get a bandsaw, what you're looking at doing is cutting curves, right? And maybe resawing. So for me, I think if you're just building up your tools, you're going to want them both probably at some point. But I like the table saw first because I think a lot of what you might use that bandsaw for can be done with a jigsaw, which will get you by. May not be as good as a bandsaw cut, but it will get you by. You're not going to be resawing lumber, but at this stage of the game, you're probably not resawing lumber or needing to resaw lumber anyway. So for me, table saw.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I didn't get a bandsaw until this year, actually, at the beginning of this year, and I've had a table saw for, I don't know, 15 years or something, and that's gotten me through building all sorts of things. And the bandsaw was one of those things I was like, I don't need a bandsaw. I'm not that kind of what would I do with a bandsaw? Right. And now it's one of my favorite things, but the point is I survived, and it was very productive for a very long time without one. So, to me, totally agree with table saw is the way to go. Now, I have gotten asked in several different places about if you have to get a first power tool. Like what's the first saw you get in general. And I'm curious if you have an opinion on this. I think circular saw, because it is basically a table saw without a table. I feel like it's the cheapest way to get a lot of stuff done. So do you have an opinion about that as well?
I think if you've got someone to help you through the basics of table saw use, it could be a great first tool, but there's a lot of safety concerns there. Just understanding why you need in-feed and out-feed support. You could use it to break down sheet goods and, again, like I said, joinery. So I think the table saw is the better purchase. It's the more, you're going to spend more money on it too, right? But if you're willing to spend that money, I do think the table saw is the better purchase. But for the average person who's kind of just learning as they go, the circular saw is easier to understand, it's got a shorter learning curve, and it's still something you're going to need later anyway, and it's cheaper. So I think there's a strong argument to be made for the circular saw as well. I think it just kind of depends on your situation a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right, so this one's for you, for Mark. Running a pro-style shop is certainly one thing to oogle at from a viewer's perspective, as well as my own, I'm sure, as your own, I'm sure. How important is it been to reinvest in your business physically and financially?
Hold on, let me read that. Running a pro.
I think he's asking, the pro-style shop, the quality of the things. How important is it for you to reinvest into your tools to keep the pro quality of machines and the pro quality of equipment in there?
Well, you know what? It's actually something that is, I think, maybe less important as time goes on, because I have changed in my particular work methods and the type of things that I show on the Wood Whisperer in response to a large group of people who watch who want to see more basic stuff. So here's the thing: I've got tons of Festool tools. I've got dominoes that if I were building and there were no cameras around, that domino would make me money. If I had a client build and I needed to get things done in a particular amount of time and hit a certain cost point for a customer, the domino would make that happen. How many times do you see the domino on the show? Now, a lot of people exaggerate how much it gets used, but the truth is I maybe use it once a year on the show. And I show all the time how to do traditional mortise and tenon joints. And the reason is because there's nothing more deflating to a new woodworker than to see somebody solve a mortise and tenon joinery dilemma by breaking out an $800 tool and going, I'm done. So it's more a lot of the choices that I make in my tooling and what I show on the Wood Whisperer will come from my hope that I'm talking to a larger audience of woodworkers who aren't just people who have shops like this, but also people who just have portable power tools. So the problem is, though, as a woodworker, as someone who still, I love tools. I just, whether it's a hand tool, a power tool, and I love woodworking. So if there are tools that I have pined over for years. How about the JDS multi-router? Ever since I saw David Marks use that in Woodworks, I was like, oh my God, I have got to get one of these things, and someday I will. I now own one. When do you think you'll see it on the show? Probably never. It's for me. It's for maybe advanced projects or things I'm doing or experimenting with on the side. And maybe someday there might be some calling, some reason to solve a joinery problem that I can't do any other way. That I say, here's this $3,000 tool that I'm going to use. But I bought it for myself because I love it. But I don't think I'm ever going to really show it on the show because it doesn't do anybody any favors to leapfrog beyond 90% of your audience.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, if I were just a furniture business, maintaining this quality level of what I currently have would be absolutely crucial. That's the reason I bought it in the first place, was because I needed pro-level tools that were not going to break down on me. But I think as I go on, I think the Wood Whisperer would be just as successful if I sold this place, went into a one-car garage, and minimized myself down to tools that I could get at Lowe's or Home Depot. I think I could still teach just as well, and would probably be even more interested in what I do. But what would happen if that occurred is I would probably start to like what I do a little bit less, because what's behind me is part of my motivation and who I am, and I would really be sad to lose that.
I can imagine. There's one here about David Marks. You mentioned him. It says you mentioned David Marks many times in his show. Do you have any association with him other than a viewer and a fan of his?
David Marks is a close personal friend at this point. It started as a relationship where I was just a viewer, and I met him at a woodworking show probably back in 2004, 2005. Met him, shook his hand, but I was just like, oh, you're so cool, David, can I take a picture? And since then, he had started teaching classes. And this was when I was back working in a cubicle for the antibody company. And he started teaching classes and private classes, and I saw something in a forum, someone mentioned it, and my wife, Nicole, is pretty awesome. She went and made a phone call and said, look, I know you guys aren't really gone public yet with this new class offering, but I've saved up some money. My husband is a huge fan of yours, and he's seen every single episode of your show. I would love to pay for him to come up for a private class. So I basically went up there. I took a group class for like 5 days, and then I took a couple of days of a private class with David, and that's how I got to know him. So in that conversation, we realized, we're both from Jersey, we both play the drums, we had a lot of, sort of shared history and didn't even realize it. Hit it off and made arrangements for me to come back and work with David, and sort of the problem is, I say the word apprenticeship, but I have to use that term loosely. I wasn't there long enough and didn't do enough to call it that. But I was able to work under him on a couple different occasions for, I would stay up there for about a month. I would find a place nearby where a guy was, had a room to rent, and I would rent that room and then just kind of commute every day to David's shop. So since then, David and I have had business relationships in various things. I've gone to his shop to do some filming. I help him on a lot of the back-end stuff with their website and with business, and we chat a lot about just all kinds of things. So he's, at this point, I'm really, really lucky to call him a friend.
Yeah, go Nicole.
Yeah, right? I mean, we AWFS in, I can't remember what year it was, but Norm was there signing autographs, and I'm in person, I could be pretty shy, and I'm just like, no, I don't even want to go. She's like, no, you're standing in this line, and we're going to go freaking meet Norm. And I was like, all right. So she kind of dragging me along with her, and I got to shake Norm's hand and talk to him, and he had heard of the Wood Whisperer, which I don't know whether he was just blowing smoke up my butt, but he said he did actually watch one of our episodes. So, great experience, but left up to myself, no, it wouldn't have had a pretty big pair, and doesn't mind asking for things like that. So honestly, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for her pushing me to do things.
That's awesome. All right, so there's a few more. We got about 10 more minutes. I don't want to keep you. So.
By the way, that plywood, I keep seeing this question in my screen. It won't go away. This piece of plywood is down there just because it's catching finish. I finished a Krenov-inspired display stand, and if any oil dropped off of it, I didn't want the oil to go onto the rubber flooring, so that's just a piece of scrap. And I haven't picked it up because I'm lazy.
You should have come up with a better story about it.
I wish it was more interesting, but it's just not.
All right, this one's for you. What influenced you or became a trigger to get you into the teaching part of woodworking?
When I was in the science world, I started working for a company called Invitrogen in Carlsbad and in California. And the company was really young, so I got into a small team that grew very quickly. And within months, I found myself in some sort of pseudo-management position, and then I was training a lot. So being a very shy, introverted personality, it was really uncomfortable for me, but it was subject matter that I understood. And I found that when I truly understand a subject, I actually am able to teach it fairly well. And teaching it also, as a lot of people know, reinforces your knowledge base. So when I started doing the woodworking thing, it was almost immediate. Even before I left my job and started working as a woodworker full-time, I got to the point where I was like, oh, you know what, I can actually write a little article for a forum, and maybe put up an entry and show people how I'm doing this. So from the very beginning, the idea of sharing this with other people, I didn't even really think of it as teaching. I thought of it as just sharing what I was doing, like what blogs are kind of intended to do. And if somebody reads it, great. But I think from the very beginning, that was at the heart of what I did. So then when I started my woodworking business to try to earn extra money, I would put out ads and advertisements just to tell people that I would teach classes. So if somebody wanted a private woodworking class, I would charge like $200 for a day and have them in the shop and teach them anything they wanted to learn. And even if it was stuff that I just learned last week, if I understood it, I'm capable of teaching it and sharing what I know with somebody. So I think the teaching stuff was just part of it from the very beginning. It probably is just part of the way that I learn. And it's part of the learning process for me. If I haven't taught it to somebody at some point, then I probably haven't committed it to memory yet. So the teaching aspect and sharing is an integral part of me getting better at what I do.
Now, as far as that education side of the thing, I've heard you talk about this before, but TV is a real big opportunity, and there's a question here about if you've been approached by to do by networks to do a TV show, PBS or TV.
I hate to stop you there, but I got a tremendous amount of garbly feedback on your audio feed just with that question. I didn't really hear anything.
Okay, I'll try it again and see if you can hear me. Basically, the question is, have you ever been approached to do a TV network show?
Okay. It's clearing up a little bit. I don't know what that is. Have I been approached to do a network TV show, PBS, HGTV, DIY? This is an interesting thing that's ongoing for me. When we first started, there were conversations with people who had ties to PBS to start a new show as kind of like trying to, this was before Rough Cut came out with Tommy Mac, trying to do that sort of like, let's replace the new Yankee Workshop. The situation didn't feel right. I backed out. It never really panned out. Since then, there have been numerous, and I'm actually surprised at how many there are, production companies that contact us either through YouTube or Facebook or whatever, that say, hey, we think you'd be good for this show. Do you want to, audition? Or we think you'd be great as a host. Let's get on Skype. Let's talk. I would say probably just in the last year, I've had about 4 or 5 of those. And the thing is, half of the time it's a concept that I'm not interested in, or a reality show type situation where it would only serve to make me look like an ass, and that's not really something I want to do. That's not good for business. So I have been approached, and nothing's ever really panned out. Just recently there was something for. It was actually a reality show, but it was a design reality show for Spike TV. That they were looking for judges, and I actually was interested in that. I thought that was kind of a cool concept, and I think what happened was I did the interview, and I think what they wanted was kind of like someone who would fly off the handle and be angry when they see things that they don't like. And the problem is I can't pretend to be somebody I'm not. I'm not an actor. I tend to be a very calm person for the most part, and I also tend to keep people's feelings in mind when I talk to them. So being the a-hole in the group of judges is just not who I am, and I don't think I was a good fit for it. So I never haven't heard back from them.
Yeah, it seems like you would have to be, for it to be worthwhile, the amount of work that I'm sure TV takes, it seems like you would have to really be into it or be really after some money, one or the other. It really has to be your primary focus. I mean, I've become pretty good friends with Tommy Mac over the years, and just went to appear on one of the episodes. It should be out this fall. Had a blast with them, but it's very clear to me that that's what he has to focus on. Like, there's no time for anything else. And I think what makes me a really bad candidate for one of these TV shows is the fact that I've already got a pretty thriving business in what I do with my content production online. So there's baggage that comes with that, for better or for worse. Maybe I bring an audience with me,
and maybe the fact that I already have an audience makes it a little bit more difficult for them to put me into a role that an unknown might be better at doing. And the fact that me personally, I've got an obligation to people who expect to see my show. We've got a paid membership site. There are people who paid money to get something from me, and I can't just not provide that thing. So there's a lot of other things that have to happen in order for me to say, you know what, I'm just going to go do a TV show. It's a little difficult when there's already a business in place.
Yeah, I can imagine. We'll do one or two more. I think our bandwidth is acting kind of weird. We're getting some weird audio stuff, so we'll just do one or two more, and then we'll wrap it up. I saw one down here from Jay about your Blacker House chair. He was complimenting it, and then said, are there any other schools you would like to attend for a certain intriguing project or style that you don't have much experience with? Oops.
Well, there's a lot of schools. The reason I go to William Ing, not only because William's great and there's good instructors there, is because I could drive there. I have a little bit of a fear of flying, and it's something I struggle with, and I don't like to travel that much. So if I could drive someplace, I'm more likely to go if I could drive there. So LA and Anaheim, it's actually just like a 5.5-hour drive for me. Other schools, yeah, there's some great schools out there. I've always wanted to attend Mark Adams' school. The Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Maine. Now, if I wasn't in a situation where I had a 3-year-old and a family and a pre-existing business, taking a couple of years to go to the North Bennett Street School, Tommy Mack's alma mater, that's one of the highest levels you can get. College of the Redwoods, was started by James Krenoff, is a great place to learn. There are just Port Townsend has a great school as well. So there's just so many places that I'll probably just never have the opportunity to get to that I would love to take classes at.
Yeah. All right. Seeing if there's anything else here that really sticks out. I don't know if you've looked through them. If you see any questions that you want to maybe do one more. I guess one I see here that's good. I know you make a lot of different things. What gives you the most satisfaction when making a project?
What gives me the most satisfaction is rising to a challenge. So if there was something that I took on that there's a new technique that's new to me and I pull it off, that to me is when I have the most satisfaction from a project. I don't get nearly as much satisfaction on things like, I don't know if you probably can't see it behind me, but there's a little toy chest back there on my assembly table. That's coming up for the Woodworkers Fighting Cancer build on October 17th. Very basic construction, not a whole lot to it, held together with screws. It's poplar and plywood. That doesn't excite me very much. What excites me is making money for a charity, certainly. So if the skills required to do it and the techniques involved are new to me and I succeed at doing them, that's when I get inspired and really excited about a project that I just made.
Cool. Well, I think that's probably about it for the questions, but I did want to ask you if you have, I know you have tons of stuff going on. You're involved in a lot of different things, and so I was wondering if you wanted to give everybody, some places to see all your content, if you want to tell everybody about your podcast and all the stuff you're into, pitch some stuff to everybody that's interested.
Okay. It's pretty simple for me. Everything that I do is accessible from thewoodwhisperer.com. We have a paid membership site if you really want to get into project builds and you like to see a lot of detail. The Wood Whisperer Guild is all about detail, but it's not free. So if you're interested in that, it's at thewoodwhispererguild.com. And the most important thing right now that I want people to know about is the Woodworkers Fighting Cancer event that's coming up. Hey, Jax, what's happening, dude? Woodworkers Fighting Cancer is an event we do every year to raise money for various cancer charities, and this year it is for the Cancer Research Institute. And it's just a great cause, and it's a great way to get a bunch of woodworkers making stuff. And the cool thing about it, the way we structured it, is because we've got these relationships with corporations, we basically pass the bill on to them. So these companies pledge a certain amount of money per completed project, and all you have to do is build it, and then they donate the money, including us. We'll also be donating $5 per completed project. So last year we partnered with Steve at Mere Mortals to just help spread the word, and he's on board again this year. So our goal is to get about $15,000. I don't know if we'll get there, but we really hope to. So if you're interested in participating in that, go to woodworkersfightingcancer.com. and all the information is there. The videos won't be out until the 17th, but at that point you'll have over a month to actually build the project and get us a photograph, or just donate if you want to, whatever you want to do. Any participation is welcome.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Marc, I want to thank you so much for doing this tonight, and I know everybody's enjoyed, asking questions, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answer them and be available for people.
Thanks for having me. This is a blast.
Yeah, well, we'll do it again sometime in the future.
Sounds good.
I got a couple things I want to remind everybody of real quick. I have a new project video coming out this week, finally. I know it's been a little while, but yes, I'm going to have one coming up soon. And I want to tell you about the next BrainPick that I'm going to have on October 21st with Izzy Swan. So don't miss that one. That'll be fun. Izzy's crazy and really cool, and so looking forward to that. So thanks again, Marc, and thank you everybody for watching and for asking questions and everything. You guys are awesome, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.